I wonder if this is going to be an interesting class.
Yeah, me too. So, what's your major?
Well, I've been batting around the idea of going into business, but I haven't decided yet, and my dad keeps telling me I have to choose a major, but I'm undeclared at the moment.
Ah, that's what happened to me my freshman year.
Oh, so what year are you in school?
I'm a senior, and I only have to take 10 more credits to graduate.
Well, that must feel great to be almost finished with school.
You can say that again, but once I graduate, I have to start repaying a student loan.
Ooh.
So I'm not looking forward to that.
But didn't your parents help you out with your college tuition?
No, my dad said he wasn't made of money, so he thought I should earn my own education. So I worked like crazy in the summer and part-time during the school year to cover my costs.
Well, that's parents for you.
And I received some financial aid and a scholarship one year, which really saved me.
Oh, that's nice.
But this past year, school has been more demanding, so I haven't been able to work as much.
Well, at least you can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
That's true.
Well, have you lined up a job yet?
Not yet, but I'm trying to line up a few interviews at the job fair next month.
Well, at least you have some ideas on your future. I'm taking a business class right now, and the teacher always lectures us by saying that life is difficult, and we should prepare for our futures by setting realistic goals, and the only place that success comes before...
Work is in the dictionary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard all that before. Let me guess, is your teacher Paul Jones?
Yeah. How do you know him? Did you have him too? The guy is, he's just real.
He's my dad. Yep.
Your dad? I didn't mean anything by what I said. I wasn't bad-mouthing him or anything. He's a good teacher and all. It's just that...
Hey, he's a dad. That's what dads do.
Well,
lecture. He has about 1,000 sermons on life, and he always shares them in his classes.
Yeah. Well, nice talking to you. I have to go.
Same here. Bye. I'll tell Mr. Jones you said hello, and maybe we could study together at my house?
No.
What's the matter?
I've got a history exam on Friday, and I'm worried I'll fail it.
Why? You're brilliant at history.
It isn't difficult, but I have to remember a lot of information. These are my notes from today.
Can I see?
Yeah.
These aren't notes, this is a full text.
What do you mean?
You don't have to copy everything. Notes are just a few words. You have to write the important words. You don't need to write the extra bits. Look, King Henry VIII was married 6 times.
That's important information.
But you don't need to write all of those words. You can draw little pictures too. Pictures can help you to remember things, and then you don't need to write so many words. Look.
That's so good. The crown is for king, and the H is for Henry. That's cool. Then the heart is love, and the number 6, well, that's 6.
Yes. So, look at these notes. Let's test your memory.
King Henry VIII was married 6 times.
Exactly. Write notes like this, Claire. Then you won't have 6 pages of notes. You'll only have 2 or 3.
Hello and welcome. We as human beings communicate all the time. We do this by communicating with ourselves, with others, and a mass. What is happening right now? That is, you watching this program on your TV sets at home is also a form of mass communication. Actually, mass communication happens with the help of technology like TV, radio, and the internet, which are called mass media. The mass media are thus diversified media technologies that are intended to reach a large audience by mass communication. But hey, before we go on about this interesting subject, let us tell you that the topic for today's program is the functions of mass media in society. Helping us understand these important functions is our subject expert Shikha Gandhi, and I am Sakshi Madwal. The objectives of today's programs are to gain an understanding about various roles of mass media, how mass media acts as a propaganda, how mass media persuades, how mass media sets agendas, basic principles of media literacy. Number 1. Functions of mass media. An introduction. Mass media defined. Communication theorists have defined mass communication as communication at a distance with technology mediating production, transmission, and reception. Mass communication happens using mass media, which are broadcast media such as radio, recorded music, film, and television. They transmit their message electronically. Print media, which use physical objects such as newspaper, books, pamphlets, or comics to distribute their message. Outdoor media is a form of mass media that comprises billboards, signs, or placards placed inside and outside of commercial buildings, sports, stadiums, shops, and buses. Digital media comprises both internet and mobile mass communication. Internet provides many mass media services such as email, websites, blogs, and internet-based radio and television. It is quickly becoming the center of mass media. Everything is becoming accessible via the internet. Similarly, mobile is also an interactive media, but has far wider reach with 3.3 billion mobile phone users at the end of 2007 to 1.3 billion internet users. The 7 mass media. This classification about the different forms of mass media became popular in the 2000s. According to it, the 7 mass media are print from the late 15th century, recordings, gramophone records, magnetic tapes, cassettes, CDs, DVDs from the late 19th century, cinema from about 1900, radio from about 1910, television from about 1950, internet from about 1990, mobile phones from about 2000.
Throughout the world, there are ancient traditions that identify the center of the head as being synonymous with the center of the earth, the center of the universe, and the very center of creation itself. This center is often depicted as egg-shaped and is identified in some cultures as the third eye.
There are multiple cultures that point us in the same direction. The Hindus have it as the third eye, or the bindi. The Buddhists have the third eye on Buddha's forehead. We see symbology in Mesoamerica, which seems to symbolize the ability to contact and communicate with the higher spiritual realms using this secret symbol that is consistent throughout all the major world religions.
When you talk about the third eye, it's about enlightenment. It's about this connection to the great unknown or the force of the universe. And we think that we are separated from the world, when in reality, we are all connected to every single object in the universe. And that inherently means that we are directly connected to every extraterrestrial being throughout the entire universe.
Is it possible that the cosmic egg isn't only a symbol for the universe or how the universe was formed, but represents a connection that exists within each and every human to the cosmos, and possibly to extraterrestrial beings that came to Earth in the distant past? Ancient astronaut theorists point out that while the third eye has historically been considered a metaphor,
Hey, why don't we do something fun next week? We have time off. We never do anything fun.
Well, I don't know. What do you have in mind?
Well, I was thinking okay.
Like
so
the library? The library is... What?
The library's boring. We can do that anytime. Listen, how about on Monday we go down to the lake and go swimming at the lake?
I don't know. I think it's going to be hot that day, and I might get a sunburn. You know how tender my skin is.
Wimp. We can do okay, so Monday we'll go down to the lake. Tuesday we're going to go mountain biking. It's supposed to be cloudy, so your tender skin shouldn't get burned.
Well, that sounds great, but I'd probably crash like I did the last time and break my arm or something.
You didn't break your arm last time. You won't break it this time. Come on, we'll go. So Monday we'll go to the lake. Tuesday we're going to go mountain biking.
Okay.
Wednesday I was thinking we could go fishing. Remember the last time we went? I caught like 10 huge fish.
Yeah, I remember, and the only thing I caught was an old boot, and you won't ever let me forget that one. So if we do anything, I'd like to enjoy it.
Well, okay then. What do you suggest?
Well, all right. Well, we could stay home and, pop some popcorn and play like Scrabble or another board game. Something like that. What?
I like board games, but we can do that anytime. Why don't we go, listen, Friday or Saturday, we'll do all those things we talked about, and then Friday or Saturday, we'll go on a picnic to the mountains. You won't break your arm. You won't get sunburned. It'll be really pleasant. Let's do that, okay?
Well...
Come on. Let's do it. It'll be fun.
Okay, we'll give it a try.
Good.
Honey, the basketball game's about to start. And could you bring some chips and a bowl of ice cream? And a slice of pizza from the fridge.
Anything else?
Nope, that's all for now. Hey, hon, they're organizing a company basketball team, and I'm thinking about joining. What do you think? Huh. What do you mean? I was the star player in high school.
Yeah, 25 years ago. Look, I just don't want you having a heart attack running up and down the court.
So what are you suggesting? Should I just abandon the idea? I'm not that out of shape.
Well, you ought to at least have a physical before you begin. I mean, it has been at least 5 years since you played at all.
Well, okay, but...
And you need to watch your diet and cut back on the fatty foods like ice cream. And you should try eating more fresh fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, you're probably right.
And you should take up a little weight training to strengthen your muscles, or perhaps try cycling to build up your cardiovascular system. Oh, and you need to go to bed early instead of watching TV half the night.
Hey, you're starting to sound like my personal fitness instructor.
Nah, I just love you and I want you to be around for a long, long time.
Welcome to the Global Observatory. I'm sitting down with Maria Ivanova. She's the Assistant Professor of Global Governance at the Department of Conflict Resolution, Human Security and Global Governance at the McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies at UMass Boston. The first question I had was in relation to the recently concluded Durban talks. In light of the outcome of those, what do you see as the prospects for the further role of global environmental governance in addressing complex issues such as climate change? Do you hold out hope for any substantive agreement coming out of the 2015 goal?
Well, first of all, thank you for hosting me here. It's really a pleasure to address your constituency, your audience, and share some of my experiences and some of my thoughts. I do work on global environmental governance, and I've been thinking about these issues for a while. In terms of what we can expect and the connection to climate change, is that global environmental governance is about the environment. Governance is simply the design and execution of policy. Environmental governance is the design and execution of policy for the environment. Global environmental governance is that same thing for the global level. So for me, climate change is part of that construct. So I would not put global environmental governance and climate change or versus climate change. To me, it's analytically it is the same construct. But I do understand that politically, operationally, there are different organizations that are working on climate issues and on various environmental concerns. Practically, what my hopes would be for the next rounds of talks, the next agreements would be that when we do consider climate issues, that we do think about the governance, about the global aspects, but also about the connection between the national, the regional, and the local levels. And climate change has become the quintessential global problem, but we do need governance arrangements. And so the way I bridge those two analytical issues, global environmental governance and climate change, is through that governance dimensions. What do we need for the design and execution of policy for climate change? And that's where we could see the nexus of, or where the nexus comes together among the various organizations and institutions in the UN system. Unfortunately, we have split those debates into various fora, and various people are engaged in them, and we've created these silos. But the way I see a way forward that I see is by bringing these issues down, and not necessarily into a local level, so to speak, or a regional level, but into a classroom level. I think the categories in which we think need to change. And rather than saying the local level and you think of this country and that country, whether it's Norway or Namibia, let's think of a classroom level. And when I teach global environmental governance and climate change, I can't separate them and say, now, today we're only going to talk about this issue. What I teach my students is to be able to connect those and to see the interdependencies. If there is a way to do that at the international level, it is only through enabling the individuals that are engaged in these to see this from day one as something that they live. And as I like often quoting Abraham Lincoln, who said, the philosophy of the classroom of one generation is the philosophy of the government of the next generation. And so perhaps somewhat idealistically, but I do believe that that is the best way forward, is to bridge those divides at the classroom level. And then the people that come out and lead governments or any type of organization will be doing this just as naturally as we all walk and breathe and eat.
Hey Tim, so are you doing some last-minute shopping before the weekend?
Well, actually, I'm looking for supplies to put together 72-hour kits for each member of my family.
72-hour kit? What's that?
Basically, a 72-hour kit contains emergency supplies you would need to sustain yourself for 3 days in case of emergency, like an earthquake.
An earthquake? We haven't had an earthquake in years.
Well, you never know. You have to be prepared. Hey, if earthquakes don't get you, it could be a flood, hurricane, snowstorm, power outage, fire, alien attack.
Alien attack?
Well, you never know. Think of any situation in which you might find yourself without the basic necessities of life, including shelter, food, water, for over a period of time.
So what do you keep in a 72-hour kit?
Well, you should have enough food and water to last you 3 days. And you might want to pack a basic water filter or water purification tablets in case your only water source turns out to be a murky pool of bug-infested water.
Ugh.
Hey, sometimes you don't have a choice. And as for food, you should keep it simple. Food that requires no preparation and that doesn't spoil, and no canned goods because they are often too heavy and bulky.
Okay, that makes sense.
And unless you have a can opener or the can has a pull tab lid, you'll have to use a rock or something to open them.
Instant mashed green beans.
Yeah, and energy bars, beef jerky, and a mix of nuts, raisins, and chocolate are possibilities.
Well, food might be nasty, but I guess you could survive. Barely.
Well, the food doesn't have to taste bad. Just select things that are easy to prepare. And you might want to include some basic comfort foods, like a couple of candy bars. Then you have to decide on the type of shelter you might need.
A hotel sounds nice.
Yeah, but that's really not an option. The reality is that you might have to evacuate to a shelter, possibly with hundreds or thousands of other people.
That doesn't sound very fun. Everyone packed together like sardines in a can, unsanitary conditions, disease.
Now you're sounding paranoid. But if a shelter isn't available, you might be completely on your own. So I always pack an emergency sleeping bag. or a small, lightweight tent in the event I have to survive on the street or in a park.
Oh, wow.
And among other things, you should pack a flashlight, portable radio, extra batteries, a small first aid kit, personal items like a toothbrush or toothpaste. Having a change of clothing is also important.
What about money? I have a credit card.
Right, like that's going to help you when the power is out. You'd better be prepared with coins and cash, and having small bills is a must.
So, what do you do to communicate with other family members in case you get separated?
Oh, in that case, I always pack two-way radios to communicate with the group. You can never depend on cell phones.
Okay.
Plus, you should decide on a meeting point in case your family gets separated.
Well, that sounds like a detailed plan, definitely.
Oh, that's not all. You never know what weather conditions you might encounter, so packing a rain poncho, a jacket, and something to start a fire with could be very useful.
Like matches?
Matches? You drop those in a puddle of water and you're toast. You need to pack at least 3 forms of fire starter. A magnifying glass, a high-quality lighter, and waterproof matches.
Well, I never thought about those either. So, what do you do if you have small kids? They'd probably go stir-crazy under such conditions.
You're exactly right. So, a little extra preparation for them is needed. If you have to evacuate to a shelter to wait out a disaster, kids soon will be bored out of their minds. So you have to pack small card games, paper, or something like pencils and crayons to draw with.
You know, preparing a 72-hour kit makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but most people think about it after it is too late.
Good morning. It's Mrs. Glover, isn't it?
Yes. Do I know you?
Let me introduce myself. My name is Richard Cookson, and I'm the local representative for the National Congress Party.
So you're a member of the government, Mr. Cookson. I have some things I want to say to you.
No, Mrs. Glover. The Social Democrats form the government, but we are the second largest party in Parliament.
Oh, yes. I get so confused. What can I do for you today?
Now, Mrs. Glover, have you decided on how you're going to vote in the general election?
No, I'm not sure yet. There are a couple of issues, and I'm undecided about which party has the best policies. Take education, for example.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to spend $25 million more on education than the governing party. The referendum result last year proved how important education is to the electorate. So, we're going to invest heavily in our children's future.
But aren't you going to increase university fees? I saw a campaign ad from the Social Democrats that said you wanted to do this.
We are going to ask some of the richest families in the country to pay a little more. But that ad you saw was just dishonest propaganda.
Now, I'm also worried about the environment. What are you going to do about global warming?
Well, you're right to be concerned. It is one of the most important issues in politics today. My party is going to press for an international treaty to reduce pollution and emissions globally. We are going to ask for a system of strict penalties for those countries that don't adhere to the treaty.
Are you going to insist on recycling in communities like this one?
We don't have plans for that at the moment, but we can consider it.
I know the Social Democrats want to promote this. What about taxation? Are you going to raise taxes?
We are going to raise taxes by about 1% on average, although the wealthiest families will pay most of that. The poorest 30% of families won't have to pay any more taxes. We are going to cut taxes for these people.
That won't include us, unfortunately.
Do you know where your nearest polling station is, Mrs. Glover?
Yes, it's opposite the public library. You must be very excited by the election, Mr. Cookson. The opinion polls show the National Congress Party up by 5%.
We think people are seeing us as a responsible party and would like to see us in power. I think we'll get a significant majority in Parliament.
Well, thank you for this little chat. I will have a good think about things before putting that slip into the ballot box.
It's been a pleasure, Mrs. Glover. Good afternoon to you.
Hey, thanks for coming to the interview today. It's nice to meet you.
Well, thank you.
To begin with, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I've always been interested in teaching in a language program like this, and I graduated with a degree in English and psychology 8 years ago.
Oh, really, both?
Yeah,
Wow.
and then I landed my first job overseas in Japan.
Oh, wow. That's pretty impressive. What did you do there? What kind of work?
Well, I worked full-time for a private language school in Tokyo for the first 2 years, and then I found a job at a community college.
Oh, really? So exactly what did you do in your work there then?
Well, I taught English and culinary arts.
You taught cooking classes?
Well, I know it sounds like an unusual combination, but I completed a program in culinary arts before I got my English and psychology degrees.
Oh, wow. You've done a lot, haven't you?
Yeah.
So what exactly, how did you teach and what exactly did you do?
Well, many of my students wanted to become chefs in restaurants, or they wanted to start their own restaurants. And in our area, there were many tourist spots. A lot of tourists came to that particular area. And so with English, they would be able to communicate not only with suppliers, things that they needed for the restaurants, food and so forth, but also their customers. And so I taught them English and cooking at the same time.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. That's interesting.
And tasty. It was.
Oh, I bet. So why did you return to the United States? How long have you been back?
I've been back for probably about a year now.
Okay, so what brought you back then?
Well, one of my former students opened a sushi restaurant in town, and he asked me to work with him.
Really? What's the name of the restaurant?
Well, it's called Flying Sushi. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes, I've been there. Their food is fabulous. It's top notch. It's really hard just to get a reservation there.
I know. And well, I worked there 2 weeknights, and then
So 2 nights a week you're working there still?
Right.
Okay.
And then, but now I want to return to teaching. I've also been working as a therapist at a treatment center for teenagers struggling with depression and other mental health disorders.
Oh, wow. That would be a really interesting job.
It is.
Wow. You have such a wide range of experiences. To be honest, we have 15 people who are applying for this position. You've got quite a background, but why don't you tell me 3 reasons why you would be the best person for this job?
Well, first of all, I understand that different students have different learning styles. And for that reason, I've used iPads, video, music, cooking, drama, role plays, and games to reach every student.
That's good.
And second, I have a background in academic and psychological counseling and advising, skills that are often needed, in working with international students.
Yeah, that could be really helpful.
So, many of them struggle with emotional turmoil, homesickness.
Yeah, coming to a new place.
Right. And so making the transition can be very overwhelming. And
good. So what would you say would be a 3rd reason?
And finally, I speak 4 different languages.
4?
Yeah.
Wow. What languages do you speak?
Well, I speak Spanish, Portuguese, and Japanese at an advanced level.
At an advanced level,
right.
Wow.
And I also speak Arabic at a high intermediate level.
Well, that's very, very impressive. You do have an impressive resume.
Thank you.
What we're doing, we're going to have 2 rounds of interviews. We will contact you on Friday and let you know whether or not you'll be coming back for the 2nd round of interviews.
Okay.
It's been really nice meeting you, and thank you for your time.
Leonardo dreams of his flying machine, just one of the ideas and inventions that came out of the mind of Leonardo da Vinci, and which are nothing short of extraordinary, as that modern choral piece acknowledges. Today, he's probably best known for his paintings, masterpieces like the portrait known as the Mona Lisa and the famous religious painting, The Last Supper, 2 of the best-known pictures in the world. But Leonardo was much more than that. He was the embodiment of the Renaissance idea of genius, a polymath who was both an artist and a scientist, an inventor, engineer, paleontologist, cartographer, stage designer, and much, much more. Born near the Italian city of Florence in 1452, he died in 1519, 500 years ago this year. He believed that to paint accurately, one needed to understand the natural laws of the universe. So he spent a lifetime observing and experimenting, sketching the flight of birds, the behaviour of water, the arc of a projectile, and the functioning of the human body. He recorded his thoughts and inventions in around 5,000 pages of notes and drawings that give an insight into his unique understanding of the visible world around him. I'm Bridget Kendall, and today on the forum from the BBC World Service, I've brought together some of the world's foremost experts on Leonardo da Vinci. Martin Kemp is a British emeritus professor in the history of art at Oxford University in the UK. Carmen C. Barnbach, born in Chile, now an American citizen, is a curator in the Department of Drawings and Prints, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, in the United States. And with me in the London studio is Professor Marina Wallace, an Italian curator and art historian. Welcome to all three of you. And before we begin, Martin, let's just reflect for a moment on Leonardo da Vinci's extraordinary, diverse array of interests, every one of which could be considered a life's work today. Why did he think it was so important to explore the world in so many different ways? And is there a common theme?
He saw knowledge of nature as a unified thing. He would not think of geology as separate from the human body. He would not think of the movement of water separate from understanding how, say, the heart worked. So he's often called a polymath. I say, in a way, he's a kind of monomath. He's trying to get a unity into all these different areas of knowledge. So it's not so much diversity in his mind as part of a single great endeavour to understand how nature works and in a way to remake nature, whether he's making a portrait, a flying machine or some kind of bit of engineering.
And Carmen, Leonardo and his vast range of talents are often spoken about in very hallowed terms, aren't they? And we hear the word genius used a lot. Was he really so superhuman?
Yes, I would say that at least the curiosity, the desire to ask questions is probably the most important and probably timeless aspect of Leonardo's genius. But let's also not forget that this was a process of self-education, of development, something that he has to become.
Marina, Leonardo has been described as the archetypal Renaissance man. What does that actually mean?
He tried all the skills that different craftsmen and different artists tried in different studios and in different ways. So he didn't just paint, he didn't just draw, he didn't just sculpt, he didn't just do engineering. He tried everything. And as Martin said, the idea really was that everything was connected. So he was good at everything, and that's what Renaissance man stands for.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
They see my disability, I see my ability. They call me disabled, I call myself differently abled. There are some incidents that happen in your life. Those incidents break you, deform you, but they mold you into the best version of you. And the same thing happened to me. I was 18 years old when I got married. My father wanted me to get married. And all I said was, if that makes you happy, I'll say yes. And of course, it was never a happy marriage. Just about after 2 years of getting married, I met a car accident. Somehow my husband fell asleep and the car fell in the ditch. He managed to jump out, saved himself. I'm happy for him. But I stayed inside the car and I sustained a lot of injuries. The list is a bit long, don't get scared. The wrist was fractured. Shoulder bone and collarbone were fractured. My whole rib cage got fractured. And because of the rib cage injury, lungs and liver were badly injured. I couldn't breathe. I lost urinary bowel control. That's why I have to wear the bag wherever I go. 3 vertebrae of my backbone were completely crushed. And I got paralyzed for the rest of my life. I finally ended up in a hospital where I stayed for 2.5 months. I underwent multiple surgeries. One day, doctor came to me and he said, well, I heard that you wanted to be an artist, but you ended up being a housewife. I have a bad news for you. You won't be able to paint again because your wrist and your arm are so deformed, you won't be able to hold a pen again. Next day, doctor came to me and said, your spine injury is so bad, you won't be able to walk again. Because of your spine injury and the fixation that you have in your back, you won't be able to give birth to a child again. That day, I was devastated. I asked my mother, why me? And that is where I started to question my existence. Why am I even alive? And that is where I realized that the words have the power to heal the soul. My mother said to me, this too shall pass. God has a greater plan for you. I don't know what it is, but He surely has. And in all that distress and grief, somehow or the other, those words were so magical that they kept me going. One day I asked my brothers, I know I have a deformed hand, but I'm tired of looking at these white walls in the hospital and wearing these white scrubs. I'm getting tired of this. I want to add more colors to my life. I want to do something. Bring me some colors. Bring me some small canvas. I want to paint. So the very first painting I made was on my deathbed, where I painted for the very first time. It was not just an art piece or just my passion. It was my therapy. And then I was discharged and I went back home. And I went back home and I realized that I have developed a lot of pressure ulcers on my back and on my hip bone. I was unable to sit. There were a lot of infections in my body, a lot of allergies. So doctors wanted me to lie down on the bed straight for not 6 months, for not 1 year, for 2 years. I was bedridden, confined in that one room, looking outside the window, listening to the birds chirping, and thinking maybe there will be a time when we'll be going out with the family and enjoying the nature. That was the time where I realized how lucky people are. That is the time where I realized that the day I'm going to sit, I'm going to share this pain with everyone to make them realize how blessed they are, and they don't even consider them lucky. That day I decided that I'm going to fight my fears. We all have fears. Fear of unknown, fear of losing people, fear of losing health, money. We want to excel in career, we want to become famous, we want to get money. We are scared all the time. So I wrote down one by one all those fears, and I decided that I'm going to overcome these fears one at a time. You know what was my biggest fear? Divorce. I was trying to cling on to this person who didn't want me anymore, but I said no. I have to make it work. But the day I decided that this is nothing but my fear, I liberated myself by setting him free. And I made myself emotionally so strong that the day I got the news that he's getting married, I sent him a text that I'm so happy for you and I wish you all the best. And he knows that I pray for him today.
We didn't start with much money or many endorsements. Our campaign was not hatched in the halls of Washington. It began in the backyards of Des Moines, in the living rooms of Concord, and the front porches of Charleston. It was built by working men and women who dug into what little savings they had to give $5 and $10 and $20 to the cause. It grew strength from the young people who rejected the myth of their generation's apathy, who left their homes and their families for jobs that offered little pay and less sleep. It drew strength from the not-so-young people who braved the bitter cold and scorching heat to knock on doors of perfect strangers, and from the millions of Americans who volunteered and organized and proved that more than 2 centuries later, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people has not perished from the earth. This is your victory. There are mothers and fathers who will lie awake after their children fall asleep and wonder how they'll make the mortgage, or pay their doctor's bills, or save enough for their child's college education. There's new energy to harness, new jobs to be created, new schools to build, and threats to meet, alliances to repair. The road ahead will be long. Our climb will be steep. We may not get there in 1 year or even in 1 term. But America, I have never been more hopeful than I am tonight that we will get there. I promise you, we as a people will get there. There will be setbacks and false starts. There are many who won't agree with every decision or policy I make as president. And we know the government can't solve every problem. But I will always be honest with you about the challenges we face. I will listen to you, especially when we disagree. And above all, I will ask you to join in the work of remaking this nation the only way it's been done in America for 221 years. Block by block, brick by brick, calloused hand by calloused hand. What began 21 months ago in the depths of winter cannot end on this autumn night. This victory alone is not the change we seek. It is only the chance for us to make that change. And that cannot happen if we go back to the way things were. It can't happen without you, without a new spirit of service, a new spirit of sacrifice. So let us summon a new spirit of patriotism, of responsibility, where each of us resolves to pitch in and work harder and look after not only ourselves but each other. Let us remember that if this financial crisis taught us anything, it's that we cannot have a thriving Wall Street while Main Street suffers. In this country, we rise or fall as one nation, as one people. Let's resist the temptation to fall back on the same partisanship and pettiness and immaturity that has poisoned our politics for so long. Let's remember that it was a man from this state who first carried the banner of the Republican Party to the White House, a party founded on the values of self-reliance and individual liberty and national unity. Those are values that we all share. And while the Democratic Party has won a great victory tonight, we do so with a measure of humility and determination to heal the divides that have held back our progress. And all those watching tonight from beyond our shores, from parliaments and palaces, to those who are huddled around radios in the forgotten corners of the world, our stories are singular, but our destiny is shared. And a new dawn of American leadership is at hand. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
Now we're going over to Chris, who's in Redford, reporting on the protests that have taken place today.
Hi, Angie. Everything has calmed down now, but tempers were high earlier today. This is the second day of protest against the new highway, and people refuse to accept this plan. They don't want to see a big new road coming through this area.
Tell me about Redford, Chris. What sort of area is it?
Redford is a small farming community, about 3,000 or 4,000 people. They enjoy living in a quiet rural area, and they don't want big trucks and buses rolling through town.
Were there any arrests today?
I spoke to the Redford Police Department, and they said there were no arrests, but some people were told to move on, and warned that they would be arrested if they didn't. I talked to some of the protesters earlier this afternoon. Why are you here, ma'am?
I will not let my son grow up in a parking lot. I moved here with my husband 5 years ago to escape the noise and pollution. I don't want it coming out here in Redford.
What do you say to the local businesses who think this road is so necessary? They say it will help Redford, connect it to the world again.
They said that about the railroad, and they closed it 20 years ago. If they want Redford to be well connected again, then open the railroad. That would cost a third of what they're going to spend on this new highway and won't cause any of the pollution. I remember hearing they were going to close the railroad, and I thought it was crazy. And now here we are, and they are ready to spend a huge amount of money to build a useless road.
Can I ask you, ma'am, what brings you out to this protest today?
We have to do everything to protect this beautiful green land. Once it's gone for good. They don't dig up roads to plant trees. We have to stop this road from happening.
A lot of angry people there, Chris?
I spoke to other people, and they said things I can't put on the radio. It's difficult to understand the anger here without seeing it yourself.
I understand that construction is due to begin very soon.
The protesters are determined to stop that. This will be in the courts tomorrow as a legal challenge to construction of the highway. They say they will stop protesting if the local government stops building and starts talking to them.
Is there any sign of that happening?
Yesterday, I spoke to the local congressman, and he said he understands people's democratic right to protest, but the highway goes ahead.
Thanks. Chris in Redford will keep an eye on that story. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jessica Talbot, and I'm here to talk a little about my father, to share some memories. We have heard some great people speaking tonight on the 10th anniversary of his death. His agent, movie directors, film critics, and many others worked in the movie business with him and recognized what a fantastic talent he was. My mother will be speaking shortly, and I hope between us we can give you some flavor of what he was like, not on the stage or in front of a camera, but as a father, a husband, a family man, because that is what we most remember about him. My father didn't win any Oscars for being a father, but for me, it was his greatest achievement. My first memory of my father, when I was no more than 3 or 4 years old, was when he took me out onto the Pacific in his beloved yacht. It is something that he would do quite often, especially during the warmer months, when his filming schedule allowed it. I was fascinated by two things that day: the huge size of the ocean, something I hadn't been aware of standing on a beach, and the second thing was my father's enormously hairy chest, which I could see through his unbuttoned navy shirt. I don't remember anything he said to me that day, but on future occasions on that boat, he used to tell me that the world was mine if I wanted it, that I could do anything I wanted to. He would tell me the only limit was the limit of my ambition. I have my father to thank for the belief that he gave me even from my youngest days. My father would use that boat as a way of escaping the hectic world of Hollywood. He used to be so happy when we were out there, sometimes with my mother, sometimes just the two of us. Sunlight coming off the waves and wind blowing our hair into our faces. When I think of our father happy and relaxed, I think of him under the big sails of the boat, not at home where he would too often be busy with reading scripts or taking phone calls. Out on the ocean, there was none of that. Even today, I feel closer to my father when I'm at sea. It's a strange feeling. Another great love of my father, which very few people know about, was his painting. Next year, we hope we'll be able to publish a book of his best pictures. He had a real passion for the coastline north of Los Angeles and would happily sit on a sand dune for 3 or 4 hours, trying to get the little tufts of grass just right. To me, it seemed frustrating, but I know he used to enjoy that. It was his land boat, and he was very good at it, as he was with everything he tried, of course. I remember once, I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, he told me, "Listen, Jessica, we have to wait for the light." I couldn't understand that because it was light, it wasn't dark. And then suddenly the sun came from behind the clouds, and my father smiled. That smile millions fell in love with up on the screen. I got to see that smile every day. He smiled it just for me. That was my dad.
Globalization is a widely discussed topic. It is therefore not all that easy to explain such a complicated term in simple words. Let's start from the beginning with the background to globalization. Advances in technology, such as mobile phones, aeroplanes, telephones, and the Internet, have made the growth of transport and communication networks possible. This means that people and countries can exchange information and goods more quickly and in a less complicated way. This process is called globalization. Globalization comes from globe and means the worldwide coming together of countries and nations. Let's look at an example. Companies used to manufacture products in their home countries, just like the companies Profi TV and Supercolor, who produce televisions in country A. Their products are in direct competition with each other, but both companies pay the same salaries and production costs. They have the same customers, use similar suppliers, and sell televisions at similar prices. In short, the same conditions apply to both companies. So far, so good. Due to technical, cultural, and economic developments that have come about through globalization, other companies which manufacture products under different conditions can now offer their products in country A too. That's why a company from country B can sell televisions here at a lower price because they were produced for less. The local firms Supercolor and Profi TV have to react to withstand the competition. And so the world grows closer together, and there is an active exchange of goods between countries. More affordable products are available for more people. However, not only does an exchange of products and economic goods take place, but also of services, knowledge, cultural goods, and even languages. All of these individual elements are closely linked and influence each other. But where there is light, there is also shadow. Because of globalization and this intense exchange of goods, people and the environment often suffer. If a company decides to move production to an economically disadvantaged country, people in industrialized countries lose their jobs. At the same time, job opportunities open up to many locals in the economically disadvantaged country. Many people in these countries work for very little money in comparison to those in industrialized countries. Therefore, they often remain poor and more often than not do not have sufficient insurance, social insurance, or health insurance cover. A further disadvantage of globalization is ecological problems such as climate change. The use of aeroplanes, ships, and lorries to transport goods over international borders is constantly on the increase. This causes more carbon dioxide to be released into the atmosphere, which, in turn, is the main cause of global warming. Even national environmental standards are ignored. This is a further cost factor in the worldwide international site competition, which should be kept as low as possible to be attractive for a company. There are therefore many sides to globalization, which affect almost all aspects of life, causing me to think that the chain of positive and negative effects will continue to grow further. What's important is to realize that globalization itself is neither good nor bad. It just depends how people deal with all the new possibilities in the future.
Obviously, this is the sequel to Fun in the City, which is a film I didn't like, so it's fair to say my expectations were low. So you could say I wasn't disappointed, as it met my expectations. It was awful. It was so awful, I'd rather not spend any more time on it by talking about it. But that wouldn't be a film review, and I think I owe you all a review to save you wasting your money going to see it. So, it starts off with this big wedding scene, and I won't go into why, but the whole scene is just there so they can make this one joke. It's not even a funny joke, it's just terrible. It's got nothing to do with the rest of the film. Anyway, it starts there. Then, instead of the characters and the plot staying in New York where the original film was set, one of them wins a ticket to India and decides to take all her friends. It's what directors do when they've run out of ideas. Let's take our characters on tour. Anyway, they gossip, cry, and shop, and they repeat this until the end. No real people would ever act like this. I didn't have any sympathy for their problems or even care what happened to them. Don't go and see it. You'll only encourage them to make another sequel. The world doesn't need 3 of these films. Please save your money and go and see the other big film this week, Twilight Mirror. So, if you're a fan of the book it's based on, you're probably as excited as I was about this. For everyone else, this is a film fans have been waiting 10 years to see. I have to confess, I was a bit nervous. I'd seen the posters and they didn't look right. I didn't love them at all. And I wasn't sure about the actors they cast either. So I went in not sure what to expect. But I loved it. One thing I really liked about it was the pace. They went backwards and forwards between the real world and the computer world, and it worked really well. The special effects brought the computer world to life, and I totally believed in it. But more than that, I felt emotionally connected to the story and the characters. The whole film worked on so many levels. It reminded me of going to the cinema as a child. How much fun that was. I can't recommend it enough.
Arches National Park is located in the dry desert of southeastern Utah, just north of the city of Moab. This park is home to over 2,000 natural arches, carved from sandstone layers by wind, water, and erosion. Local and international visitors can enjoy breathtaking views of these natural wonders throughout the year. Some formations are just off the road and are accessible to all people within a short distance on well-traveled trails. Other arches can only be reached by driving distances on four-wheel drive roads or after long strenuous hikes along sandy washes. Like any hike of this nature, you should be prepared for the adventure in the desert. First, hike with a partner for safety and leave word where you will be traveling in case of an emergency. Personally, I enjoy hiking with family members and close friends. Second, carry a cell phone with you. However, keep in mind that you might not get any reception, so don't depend on it. Third, be sure to have the right clothing and footwear for the hike. Light, breathable clothing is best during the summer, along with a hat and sturdy hiking shoes. Fourth, carry plenty of water because you can become quickly dehydrated without it. Having a few snacks can give you energy too. Fifth, take a small first aid kit with you, particularly on longer hikes in case you get injured. Sixth, pack a detailed map of the area you are hiking, along with a compass and/or a GPS to locate your position. You might need them to navigate through unfamiliar terrain. And finally, take nothing home with you, except for pictures and memories. You can protect these areas by leaving all rocks, flowers, and other objects for future visitors. Cosmetic or plastic surgery often evokes images of famous personalities wanting to alter their appearances through elective surgical procedures. However, reconstructive surgery is a procedure that makes a similar but different impact on the lives of many around the world, and many of these patients suffer from either congenital defects, like a cleft palate, or from injuries sustained in accidents or as a result of animal bites. Some disfigurements can also be due to the effects of disease or infection. Yet the individual with such defects often bears more than just outward physical marks. Loss of hope and self-worth, as well as acceptance, are commonplace. In the past, such procedures were only available in developed countries where the medical expertise and financial resources were available to afford such operations. However, a number of worldwide organizations made up of volunteers make regular visits to developing countries to provide reconstructive surgery to those who could not otherwise receive such care. In addition to the care they provide, these volunteer specialists also provide training to healthcare workers in these procedures so that local hospitals, nurses, and doctors can become self-sufficient. The end results of such efforts have transformed lives. The patient now can live with some normalcy and hope for the future with less fear of being ostracized by neighbors and family. And the healthcare worker who performs the procedure perhaps feels a greater understanding and compassion for those who suffer from such defects. There are many ways for people to assist in supporting these volunteer efforts. Although most people do not have the medical expertise to perform reconstructive surgery, they can still donate time, money, and supplies to such organizations. A quick search on the internet can get you started.